Hello, I'm Tia Ramey. I give communication tips and strategies to leaders to help them with their personal and professional life. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Tonight, I really wanted to talk to you about listening mistakes. Sometimes we are looking for communication tips and strategies because we want to know how to say things in a way that gets us the results that we want. But what I will let you know, most of communication tips and strategies really do not start at what you say. It starts at what you hear and how you're hearing it. And sometimes there are common mistakes that we are making in our listening that's really gauging the things that we say and why it's not landing well. Now, not all leaders are great communicators. They're great doers, and that's what makes a leader a leader. It's they do, and through a lot of their actions and their deeds and the things they take charge of, they can inspire others because they put systems in place. But if they can sharpen their communication skills, and today we're speaking about sharpening your listening skills, then it's really going to make it much easier on you to get the results that you want. Again, in both your personal life and your professional life. I like to incorporate the personal life because leaders do not stop being leaders just because they're off the clock. A lot of times you go home and that same attitude, that same thing that you have, that you embody, that helps you to be great at what you do, can also help you at home quite a bit. I'm sure it's just in your core. That's how it is. And so tonight, the reason why listening is so important is because there's a lot of misunderstandings that occur at the listening level. It's not always what you say that's the problem. And to those of you who are, perhaps the listener, it's not always what someone said that's the problem. Sometimes it very much is how you heard it and what you were hearing. So how do we gauge whether or not we are hearing things appropriately? There are 3 common mistakes that I write about in my book, and you can check it out on my website. My book is called Canceled if you haven't heard me talk about it before, and maybe this is the first time you're watching one of my videos. You can visit tiaramey.com and get your copy. But I talk about the most important way to know that you're going to have some productive dialogue, hopefully, is if you come with the intent of speaking honestly. Honest dialogue and making a full commitment to discovering the truth and going on a truth journey together with the person you're intending to communicate with, or the people you're intending to communicate with, really needs to be the foundation at the core of what is driving this dialogue. And when you can speak honestly and you're trying to figure out what is true, then you know that you're asking someone to put their piece with yours and to figure that out. But sometimes we're not really starting from an honest place. And how do we know that? The number one mistake I'll say is if you were listening through your emotions. I call that expressive listening, where you're allowing certain words to trigger how you feel. And sometimes you get tricked up on your feelings and your emotions, and you're not really hearing things accurately because certain words triggered you emotionally. And so if you are really just focused on people using the right words that satisfy your feelings, you're going to make a big mistake here, because you're not really making enough room for someone to speak to you honestly from the place of what's going on with them. What you're saying is, when you're tripped up on your feelings and you're stuck at how certain words made you feel, and I want to step aside and say we're not talking about derogatory words. We're not talking about someone that's insulting you. We're just speaking to someone that is speaking the facts as they know it to be. Truly, they're trying to be honest with you, but their version of honesty is tripping your feelings up because you don't like certain words that they used. That's going to be a really big problem if someone has to satisfy your feelings and able to tell you the truth. That's a big problem. And so I always say that when you know you're ready for the truth is when you're willing to adjust how you feel, and someone doesn't have to adjust what they say. So if you're going to adjust your feelings to hear the truth versus asking someone to adjust what they say so that it can make you feel better, then you know that you're ready to go on a real honest truth journey. And you hear people say this all the time, like, hey, I'm not easily offended. Go ahead and spit it out. Say it how you say it. Shoot from the hip. There are a lot of people who prefer someone to be direct, say what they mean what they say. But some people prefer for someone to ease them, and they need a little sugar and able to take in the words that they need to hear. But that is not always honest, and it's best to be able to get someone's honest expression or their honest translation, for lack of better words, of what is happening, so that way you can settle on what the truth is and figure things out from there. This way, this ensures you're not being manipulated on top of that, because if you cipher words through your feelings, and that is how you translate certain words, by the way it makes you feel, then you're really kind of asking for this person to manipulate you so that they can tell you something. And I bet a lot of us never thought that we are actually the authors, or we're self-authoring our own manipulation by doing this. So think about that. I know I just threw a lot at you in a short amount of time, but when I say that certain words trigger certain feelings, I'm saying that sometimes you're hearing the word through your feelings, so you don't understand the actual definition of what that word is. For example, one of those trigger words that I hear all the time is capitalism. And some people have so many feelings about the word capitalism that they're not paying attention to what is the actual definition of that word. And so they feel greed, they feel anger, they feel tense when they hear that word. But when someone is talking to you just logically, and they're using the actual definition, you're not hearing them properly. What you're hearing, if someone says, I'm defending capitalism, you're saying, I'm defending greed, and really they're saying, I'm defending free markets, for example, just as a lack of a better words of, private businesses, they support private ownership of businesses. And most people do support that. I really don't know anyone that doesn't, but they've associated capitalism with their emotions. And so they're responding and reacting out of their emotions versus, really just taking the time to listen based on what the actual definition of the word is. That's just mistake number one. The second mistake is what I call agreeable communication. This means that you are ciphering words and expressions through whether or not someone agrees with you. And that's a really big problem. If you need people to agree with you, then you're really not coming into the conversation wanting to have honest dialogue. You really just want to have agreement. And I understand there are some things that we do need to agree on. It's very important. I think at the very beginning, if you're going to be that person, if you have a hard time with certain topics and you need agreement and you really have a hard time talking to anyone that doesn't agree with you, then it is very important that you, in that dialogue, speak for yourself as a leader especially. Make sure that you say things that are subjective versus saying things that are objective. So one of the examples that I give is you can say that Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player in the world. Now, if you need agreement, you should probably not say that. Speak for yourself. I really believe that Michael Jordan is one of the best basketball players in the world. There are a lot of people who think that maybe LeBron James is the best basketball player in the world. So if you need people to agree with you and you really don't want a lot of banter, then speak for yourself. Most of the time, people will agree that that is your opinion and that is your reference, that is your space, but they may not necessarily agree with your translation of that. So that's a huge mistake you're making if you're listening and you're only listening for things that you agree with. And if someone says something that you disagree with, at times people become very tripped up at those points and they're not hearing anything else. Let this person, if you're the listener and someone is saying something that you disagree with, then let them get their full point out. Let them make their entire point. Sometimes we're disagreeing with some of the examples or some of the facts they may use to assert to their point or allude to their point, but they haven't made their point just yet. And if you've become tripped up because you have to have agreement and you're going to disagree with them on any point, and let me just give you one brief example. I have seen people rip someone apart for using, we'll say maybe they have mispronounced a word. And now you don't want to listen to what this person has to say because their grammar is not as great as yours. Maybe they don't have the same level of articulation that you do of certain words. And now this person is not even worthy of being listened to because you don't agree with their grammar. I've seen that happen. It's really petty, to be quite honest, when we do these sorts of things. But I will tell you what is happening. What's really happening at that point, and this video is getting a little longer than I want it to be, is that when we have a conversation, I say this all the time, this is an opportunity to decide if you want to expand your reality or protect your reality as you know it. Every time we have a conversation, you have to make a very quick decision as to whether or not you're willing to become a different type of person than you were before with new information. And so we like agreement on these things because we want to really assess whether or not this person that's talking to us is worthy enough of changing the world that we know it to be. So we want them to be precise, we want them to be accurate, we want them to be smart and intelligent. But at times, there are times where we're going to have to value the life of this person more than we value the information itself. And that is hard to do sometimes if you are a person who needs agreement, especially if you are a very smart, intelligent leader. Listen to what a person has to say. Let them make their full point before you start picking them apart. And once they make their full point, decide whether or not you agree with the bigger picture and not necessarily some of the things that they use leading up to their big ideology. In another video, if you're a person who's trying to talk to an agreeable listener, I give you some other tips. But I want to make my third point. My third point is that there are times where we have this thing called egocentric listening, where you are only listening through your ego and you get tripped up on words that do not resonate with your ego. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there are some times where people have to literally, if they're not complimenting these types of people and they're not saying something that they feel they can truly relate to or truly connect with, they're just not hearing you. They're not very interested. So with people like that, you have to say, I really value your opinion. I think you're a brilliant mind. Can I run this by you? So if someone isn't directly making you feel good about yourself, then you may have a hard time listening. It's a big mistake. And again, this really isn't a great breeding ground for honest dialogue. Honest dialogue means that you are adjusting yourself so that you can hear what needs to be said, not the person talking to you having to adjust their words so that you can hear it. Those are different things. And so if you want honesty, you're going to let them speak the way they speak according to who they are, not necessarily trying to retrofit what they say to who you are. And that's what egocentric listening is. It says that, well, if I can't see myself in what you're saying, then I'm not really interested in listening. And there are a lot of people, a lot of leaders who can be big and hype on the ego, and they really need to understand where they fall into this information. If they can't see themselves in it, they're not really interested. So, or they don't care, or, maybe they'll belittle it. But these are some common mistakes that some people make. And if you want to know if you maybe fall into some of these mistakes, you can go on my website, tiaramey.com. There is a tab called assessments, and you can take an assessment and it'll help you figure out which of these listening mistakes you might be making. But in the meantime, just take some of this in. It's a lot of information. Sorry this is running over more than I like it to be. I like to stay around 10 minutes, but thanks for hanging in there with me. If you have found yourself in this content at all, make sure that you just figure out how to adjust. And again, I've got a lot of great tips for how to manage someone that you may know that is making these listening mistakes, or to manage yourself, and there's suggestions for how to do that in my book, Canceled. But thank you so much, class, for joining me tonight. Hopefully you will join me in the next video. If you like this content, make sure that you hit subscribe and purchase my book, Canceled. You can get it also as an audiobook on Audible. Again, thank you for watching, and we will talk again.